So the tying run is at second. The run that would win the World Series is at first.
I remember perfectly. I was sitting in my living room with my gang from Expos Nation. And it was the Phillies and the Jays.
You have to remember, Toronto and Montreal is water and fire.
Joe Carter is the batter. Now the 2-2. Well hit down the left field line. Way back and gone!
When Joe Carter hit that, and I heard that announcer say,
Touch 'em all, Joe! You'll never hit a bigger home run in your life!
crushing, crushing.
Joe Carter with a 3-run homer!
And a bit of jealousy, because we were here first.
The winners and still world champions!
And all I could see when he was running around the bases was seeing the Expos doing the same thing. Was seeing a Larry Walker hitting that home run.
Walker hits one way out into the bleachers.
We would have liked to have been the first Canadian team to win the World Series. I think that would have been terrific.
The Blue Jays have repeated as World Series champions.
Packing the place every night and winning back-to-back championships. That was supposed to be us.
It was torture to watch the Blue Jays win the World Series, but it was tempered by the fact that the Expos had an incredible finish at the end of 1993.
The Expos won 30 of their final 39 games in '93, finishing a close second to the eventual National League champion Phillies. Montreal fans had every reason to be hopeful.
We were just improving every year. It was unbelievable, and I knew our time was going to come.
Manager Felipe Alou had one of the best outfields in the game. Larry Walker was in right, Marquise Grissom in center, and Felipe's son Moises was in left.
3 consecutive round trippers by Montreal. The Expos lead it 9-2.
The Montreal Expos were really kicking butt that year, and Felipe Alou was about to have some tremendous success up there because they had a great, great team.
That the Expos had the best team in baseball in 1994 was not lost on us before it happened. I think we had a pretty fair idea that that was going to be a team after we watched them down the stretch the year before.
On the eve of the '94 season, some pundits felt the Expos had a shot to follow Toronto's back-to-back pennants and become the next Canadian team to reach the World Series. But while the team was solid, baseball's collective bargaining agreement had run out, and that spelled potential problems for this star-crossed franchise.
There was the specter of the possibility of a shutdown hanging over that season.
The dislike, the distrust of both sides to each other kept getting worse and worse.
Neither side was willing to budge.
They knew it was going to be a long strike. They knew that there was some big issues that year.
The clock is ticking because the owners have said they will unilaterally implement their salary cap proposal after the season. The players have a simple choice. Take the salary cap proposal now, take it after the season because they impose it, or strike.
It was obvious that bad times had a chance to be right around the corner.
Throughout the negotiations, the Expos did their best to keep their focus on baseball.
You dream to play on a team where you go to the ballpark every day and you're going to win every day. We were the best team, and there was no doubt, I think in anybody's mind, that we were the best team.
But you always had that, oh, the strike. The strike was there. Of course it scared us, and rightfully it scared us.
None of us would like to go on a strike, but some things had to happen.
We knew, for the good of baseball, you had to negotiate a new contract. For the good of the Expos, you could have waited another year.
3 years before the triumph and tragedy of the Expos' '94 season was the '91 campaign, one of the darkest in franchise history.
Calderon, and he is disgusted with himself.
Their 71-90 record that year was their worst in 16 seasons, and it wasn't just the team that appeared to be collapsing.
Wallach chased a bad one. Strike three. The Expos do not have a hit yet.
No, Olympic Stadium itself was imploding as a 55-ton beam fell from the roof onto the field, forcing the team to play its final 13 home games on the road. But then this was just another in a long litany of problems inflicted on the Expos and their fans by this stadium, a facility that wasn't even built for them.
Olympic Stadium was built for the Olympics. It really wasn't a baseball facility.
I remember walking in just before the Olympics, and I almost had a heart attack when I saw it, because this was going to be a failure.
Olympic Stadium to Quebecers was a bit of a thorn in the thigh because of the costs.
The stadium eventually cost $1 billion, and as you know, the roof never worked.
They spent a lot of money on that place. The fans never liked it. It's just that simple.
It was a terrible place to watch a baseball game. It was cold, it was hollow, it was nothing more than the world's largest ashtray.
Coming off a terrible season in an equally flawed building, all the Expos could do was keep their chins up.
Gotta have a positive attitude because we were the worst last year. It's going to get better, so there's no pressure on us.
No, the pressure was on Expos general manager Dan Duquette.
I sat down with Bill Stoneman and Claude Brochu, and together we did a 3-year projection of the players in terms of their talent, in terms of their value to the team, and in terms of what the team could pay them. But when we put the blueprint together to have a decent team over a couple of years, we were really shooting for 1994.
The process began immediately after the 91 season when the Expos made some much-needed additions. They traded for catcher Darren Fletcher and a pair of solid pitchers in Ken Hill and John Wetland.
We had traded for a top starter and a closer, and that gave us the bookends for our pitching staff.
Hill went on to win 16 games in '92, and Wetland registered 37 saves, giving the Expos 16 more wins than the previous year. Aiding the turnaround was a man named Alou. No, not Moises, who was a rookie that year. His father, Felipe, who took over a most familiar team as manager in late May.
Most of these people have played for me somewhere, and they know that I want action to do the impossible. Sometimes he did it.
Felipe possessed the perfect temperament to lead a young squad.
Well, one man can't do it. It takes all of us to see what's going on.
He was fun to learn from.
I believe any time somebody steals a bag, it's my fault that they stole.
And that's what Felipe was and is. He's a baseball man through and through.
With a full season at the helm, Felipe guided the Expos to a 94-68 record in '93, closing out the year in furious fashion to finish 3 games behind the eventual National League champions.
They simply ran out of time. The only thing that stopped the Expos from overtaking the Phillies in 1993 was the schedule. So you could see it coming.
And for the second time in this series, the Expos have come up with a rally as they sweep the series.
They were starting to develop a little brashness. They were going to have a swagger when the next season started.
The one caveat to '94 was economics. It was a recurring theme in Montreal, one that ultimately became synonymous with the franchise.
We knew that we had a very tight, close, short window to keep this team together because of the fiscal restraints that we were working under.
As such, Duquette made the decision to part ways with fan favorite Delino DeShields.
Regardez Delino DeShields.
In exchange, the Expos received a promising but slight 22-year-old pitcher named Pedro Martinez.
The genesis of that trade really was Dennis Martinez was playing out his option. There was no way with our revenues that we could fit him in with this group of young players that we were putting together. So we had to trade one of our young players to get a good pitcher to replace Dennis Martinez.
I was one of the guys who roasted Dan Duquette because all I knew was how skinny Pedro Martinez was.
This kid's only about 160 pounds.
That Tommy Lasorda, his own manager in LA, said he wasn't strong enough to be a successful starting pitcher.
We were blasted here. We were the biggest idiots, only doing it for money. We would be able to use Dennis Martinez's sweater and not have to buy a new one. I mean, we were killed. And yet, when we made the trade, Dan said to me, you know what? With this trade, we're going to win in '94.
Tip of the cap from a guy who deserves the ovation he's getting, Pedro Martinez.
This city has always been and will always be about the Montreal Canadiens. But when the Expos came in '69, you had this incredible love affair.
I remember sitting at our kitchen table listening to a call-in show what our new team's name would be. Someone called in and said, well, we just had Expo 67. Why don't we name it the Expos? And it stuck.
The Montreal Expos were born during baseball's centennial season of 1969, the first ever Major League team to play its home games somewhere other than the United States.
When they came alive, they weren't just another team. They were the only team that wasn't an American team. They were Canada's baseball team.
We will all be proud of our Montreal Expos.
This is what the city wanted. They wanted good baseball, and they're going to get it.
People forget that this was a pretty good baseball market, that the Montreal Royals did pretty well here.
The Royals were a Montreal institution for 62 seasons, the last 16 the Dodgers AAA affiliate, and the stepping stone for some iconic baseball legends.
Jackie Robinson played here. Roberto Clemente played here.
For Montreal, they had had the experience of being in AAA. Now they wouldn't settle for that anymore. They're too big, and Montreal was suddenly a major league town. The tears were just rolling down my cheeks, and frankly, I was standing next to Mayor Drapeau, and the tears were rolling down his cheeks too.
Heir to the Seagram's Wines and Spirits companies, Bronfman was a Montreal native and his pride knew no bounds.
To have 45,000 Americans stand at attention for our anthem, that was a huge day.
The home opener at Jerry Park was equally historic, for it was the first Major League game to be played on international soil.
Crowd beginning to stand.
That's really something, a standing ovation before the first ball is pitched out.
The fans went insane. You couldn't get another person in the ballpark. They had people that were standing on ladders outside the ballpark trying to look over the fences. The excitement was big time. It really was.
Oh, it was so much fun.
Jerry Park was about as intimate as it gets. Anywhere in that park, you were touching players practically.
Nobody cared that they lost 20-odd games in a row, that they finished with 110 losses. Major League Baseball was in our town, and we celebrated it.
Right from the very start, the fans took to Rusty Staub, and the baseball writer Ted Blackman dubbed him Le Grand Orange.
See that hair? That's why they call him Le Grand Orange.
Who didn't love Le Grand Orange? Although I do have a fixation for shortstops.
He became the first baseball superstar in Montreal.
Rusty Staub is embraced by Expos fans as their own living legend.
Not only could Rusty hit for power, he actually embraced the culture of Montreal. He learned French.
The fact that I tried to speak their language was the one thing that really separated me from the rest of the guys.
He was one of those guys who showed he loved to play here. And of course, he was big and tall, and he had a massive red hair, and he was amazing.
So you can imagine the shock Expos fans experienced when, after just 3 seasons, Le Grand Orange was forced to bid au revoir.
When Rusty Staub was traded to the Mets, that was the first time I felt that there was another element to professional sports.
It did break everyone's hearts, certainly just a little bit, that he was not going to be le bottigeur de doigts for the Les Expos any longer.
It was hard for the fans to say goodbye to their first baseball hero, and it was just the first in a long line of personnel decisions that would go on to reflect baseball's changing financial landscape.
When free agency came about, we had the first pick, and we picked Reggie Jackson. And then the Yankees started bidding for him, and San Diego did. Reggie eventually signed with New York, and I remember George Steinbrenner said, Bronfman might have Seagram's, Ray Kroc might have McDonald's, but I got the Big Apple. So I said, there's only one way we're going to be able to do this, and that's to grow our own talent.
Charles did what he had to do to survive, and that was he put a lot of resources into the scouting staff. He put a lot of resources into the minor league system, and he said, fellas, I want you to go out and build the best organization in baseball.
And while the Expos endured 8 losing seasons at Jerry Park, the organization's overall plan was being executed to precision.
I got to give their scouting department and their development department a lot of credit because, I mean, they were signing some monster players.
Steve Rogers joined the team in '73.